Silicon Slope Summit is Utah's original and longest-running grassroots tech event. It provides entrepreneurs, startups, and leaders the resources and community they need to succeed. With the pandemic behind us, we're excited to bring Silicon Slope Summit back to its original January dates in conjunction with the Sundance Film Festival. We have some unbelievable news. Silicon Slope Summit is free for all Utahns for the first time ever. You heard that right. Silicon Slope Summit is now free. For those looking for an upgraded experience, we are also offering VIP tickets for just $95. Thanks to our partners, sponsors, and government leaders, Silicon Slope Summit is the most accessible tech and startup event in the world. Summit will be hosted in multiple locations throughout the week in both Utah and Salt Lake Valley. There will also be a Startup Alley at Summit this year, where startups and entrepreneurs can meet with investors from around the world to pitch their ideas, receive feedback, and promote what they're building. Of course, we'll be bringing in world-class leaders and speakers, as we have in the past, but we'll also be hosting specific tracks and bringing attendees together for curated networking in a way never done before. You don't want to miss this year's summit. To register, buy VIP tickets, learn about sponsorship, and apply for your startup to be part of Startup Alley, go to siliconslopes.com/summit.
Do you have to wear the sport coat and kind of dress up?
I mean, I got to represent the governor, so.
I think you have to do it. Huh?
Yeah.
You don't have to wear the tie all the time.
No, so we're in no tie office because the governor doesn't wear a tie.
Oh, he doesn't?
Mm-mm.
I don't know if I've noticed that.
Yeah. So that's when I first got hired, I was like, what's the attire for this? Because I don't own a suit.
You gotta go to Men's Warehouse.
Yeah. So I had to go buy some, and then I was like, I'll have good clothes in like 5 weeks. And they're like, okay, that's fine. But yeah, that's kind of how it worked out.
How are you enjoying it? Tell everyone. And first of all, welcome to the show. I never do that.
Yeah.
I always forget to welcome people to. We've known each other for quite some time. Yep. In various roles. This new role you're in, I'm really excited about, and the state should be really excited that you are in this role in particular. But tell everybody about what it is, because it's never existed before.
Yeah. So in this year, beginning of 2024, the governor launched a program to kind of do two major things. One is promote what's happening, right? We get all these accolades, Entrepreneurship magazine, Forbes magazine, and we've been doing this for a long time, kind of just bootstrapping entrepreneurship of Utah. Not that we started it. It's been going on forever. But we've kind of helped grow it from grassroots, which has been so cool. And I think it's like the government was like, well, what can we do now? We've done a great job. Now what do we do? So he's like, what if we could just market it better? So to brand us as the startup state, we've been doing it ourselves. So that's the highest level, is can we do that? And what does that even look like? And then the second thing that he was like, well, what we keep hearing over and over again, and we'll probably get into this a little bit more, but what's happening here? We've run into tons and tons of people, and you probably do this too. And they're like, how'd you not know our event was yesterday?
Yeah.
You needed that.
So many events.
Yeah. And no one knows about them.
Yeah.
And so and that's the other thing is how can we drive people to the right resources without creating them? I don't want to create new programs unless we have to, because they probably already exist in some form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. That's a really interesting thing about our community. And something I've been thinking about a lot too is when we were first doing this, 2012, 2011, something like that, there were no events.
None.
If there was an event, it was so wild.
Yeah. There was tons of people there.
Yeah.
I mean, we were in the bottom of Church and State, before it was even done being finished.
Yeah. If there was an event, I was crazy. What? There's an event for what we do?
Yeah.
And now there are so many events. It's actually changed how even Silicon Slopes operates.
Right.
Honestly, it's what is our role in this? Because events are not what is needed. And we were basically an event first organization for at least 7 or 8 years, right? Leading up to COVID, that's what we did. COVID changed everything. And I don't think we've been an event first since. But even now, it's we probably do too many events. All of these things are being done. There's this really cool, you know, Jeremy Brockbank with Retail War Games, and he has this retail meetup. There's a bunch of meetups that I'm learning about. that are so incredible, and it's like, this is better than anything we've ever done. Like,
Yeah.
let's put that on our website.
Totally. Yeah. So I'm reading a book right now that talked about like we had to be event first because there was no place to aggregate.
Mm-hmm.
People were just kind of doing their thing. And I think we're kind of on the tail end. I don't know where the line is, but we're seeing really unique events popping up now. I went to one a couple of weeks ago that was on the exit side, like the entrepreneurship through acquisition side of things. And I'm like, no one's really leading that charge yet. But as we I think we're not on the tail end of entrepreneurship, we'll never be there, but like of what the capabilities of the state are, that's a core one as we progress, I think.
Wait, tell everybody what your role is though, specifically, like what your title is.
So I'm the Director of Entrepreneurship for this initiative, Startup State Initiative. But yeah, so I'm basically a marketing engine. I'm at the highest level. I'm like tourism,
It's actually so cool.
So cool.
Is it fun? Are you having fun?
Oh, it's super fun because as we're so early, right? Like,
yeah.
So it's kind of like I'm a startup within government because we don't necessarily, I'm going to say play by the rules, but we have a different charter than the different other programs. Like, I'm not trying to start companies. I'm trying to say, look, Clint's doing amazing things. Go check him out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is a unique role, I think, for everybody.
Yeah. How do we brand it as the startup state, right? Like, how are you thinking about that? Because obviously I've thought a lot about branding, and prior to, taking over Silicon Slopes or turning it into a nonprofit that we did, I wasn't the biggest fan, and I don't think you were either. Like, I don't think a lot of us were. Like, there's this name, and we're comparing ourselves to Silicon Valley.
Yeah.
Do you worry about? And now obviously there's so much brand equity, and it's awesome. So
yeah,
great,
totally love it.
But it would make no sense to change it now. But branding ourselves as the startup state, do you worry like some of the same criticisms might come up where like, are we actually like, are we better than, from a startup perspective, Silicon Valley?
Yeah. So I hope we don't compare ourselves.
Yeah, I do too.
I don't think we need to. We're so different in the offerings we have. Utah's such a unique place. And people love it here. Nobody loves being in San Francisco. Not that they don't. I'm not saying that completely, but like they leave but people leave here and come back.
San Francisco, one of the greatest cities ever.
Yeah.
Horrible.
Yeah.
Horrible.
It just has its own struggles, And I think every city does, but you look at like the population of people who come to Utah and stay, they just absolutely love it. They love the people. They love the culture. There's issues everywhere, but they just love it. Like they come to find this place as home, whether that's in their 80s because they just want to retire or, young people who go out and get into the workforce and then like, you know what? I did New York. I'm coming back.
Yeah.
Which is what I did.
Yeah. How long were you in New York?
A year.
And you were doing what?
Consulting.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah. Got to work with some big companies.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
So tell me what you think about the entrepreneurial ecosystem in the state and how we grow it, where it stands now, because I actually do think we're the entrepreneur capital of the world. And I think we are this startup as well. But per capita, because I think we could make a strong argument for both on startup and entrepreneur. And there's probably not even too much of a difference between those two things, right? But I do think we're the entrepreneur capital of the world. And you're the Director of Entrepreneurship. Yep. Like, where's our entrepreneurial ecosystem at right now?
Yeah.
And how do you grow what's already thriving?
Crushing it? Yeah, I think about this all the time. So I think there's two things that people don't think about. We tie startup, the word, into tech. Mm-hmm. And they're so closely aligned. I don't. To me, I love lawn mowing businesses just as much as pharmaceutical. Like, I think if you go out there and you're going to shovel some lawns or whatever you're going to do, it's so exciting, right? Mm-hmm. Like me and my buddies joke, we're like, you know what? Screw this. I'm just going to go mow lawns. Like that just sounds way more fun.
Yeah.
And if we look at it statistically, 99% of the jobs, or the businesses in Utah are these small service businesses, 1 to 2 employees. So like, is 1% exciting or is 99% exciting? Right.
Yeah.
So my thought is that if we can help encourage people, and you know this, right? My first jobs were paper distributions and, selling random stuff on the street. If we can get people just into it at some level, then it's going to progress, right? They're going to buy up the next lawn mowing business, or they're going to be like, you know what? my child went to school for tech. Maybe he can build us some software that'll help us run better, or whatever the story's going to be. And I think coming from that point of view, we probably are the startup capital.
Yeah.
Like in a real way.
That's
like people just try.
That's a great point.
And so I think if we can encourage that, and we are going to as the state. So I went to the launch of iHub, recently, which was incredible. And I think more and more resources, like I don't think we need more. We need to encourage people to be part of those programs.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like, let's not compete. Let's not make 10 within like a mile, which is what we're kind of at. But let's find the ones that are winning, right? And I call it stabilize. Let's stabilize what's working really, really well. Like, for example, a lot of people don't realize the Small Business Development Center is still there for them, right? Because they're like, oh, I got to go to Silicon Slopes. But you're like, which is great, but this is a free resource coming from the government. The majority of these people are ex-executives, and they're just waiting for you to call, like that's a government program that, again, no one knows exists, but they're like, no, wait, I'm going to wait for this thing. And you're like, just go to both. Like you can participate in many, many ways.
Oh yeah. If someone's choosing between us and the Small Business Development, go to the Small Business Development.
I'm just saying, like, as an example.
Oh my gosh. Why do you think that we compete with each other in the community realm?
Okay.
And I mean, it's not just the community realm. There's another piece of this, which is where if a company starts, a specific type of company, let's say a cookie company, starts doing really well, then there's like 15 of them.
Totally.
Right.
Totally. Yeah.
And I think that is a unique thing to Utah.
Totally. So I think there's a couple reasons for that. One is we have the best sales force in the world, right? Like you go on a mission, you get told no a million times, and you're not afraid to get no thrown at you. The most unique thing that we can have, right?
Yeah.
And so when you see something exciting and you're like, well, I can do that.
Yeah.
And you're like, so you go out and try and you get a yes right away because we're good salespeople. Well, then you go get the second yes and the third yes, right? And so now you naturally have two people competing in what seem like the same thing. The second thing that's unique about that is we share business model. So if you remember back like 2015-ish, SEO was dominating this area, right? Yeah. Well, they would call their buddy and be like, dude, you can do this. I'll teach you how to run this business. Go out and do it. No different than when we see with dentists and like we teach this next generation of people how to do what we did better than anybody else. So we naturally compete against each other because we're like, well, if you're making money, I can make money.
Yeah. What
we've learned in our area of startups, there's no money. Like it's so difficult. And I want to throw this out to everybody. It's not a scalable business model. There's no money in it. And I will say this over and over again. So it has to be stabilized by the community.
Yeah.
It has to be stabilized by, and I'll buy tickets, like give back to the community that, and I say it this way, you took from. Like for a long time, like you gave me a ticket to Silicon Slopes early on. I had no money. I was broke. And it was like, I can't wait until I can buy my own ticket, right? Like till that $100 or whatever it is doesn't matter to me. In fact, I want to buy someone else's as well, because I thought that was such a good gesture on your part for me personally at that time in my life. And I think that that's something that we do have to recognize. You know, Corbin doing an amazing job giving incredible amounts of money and resources to this program. And we saw that with Rev Road, you know, now Rev Road's moved a little bit upstream, which is amazing. And I think it's time now. And you talked about like, where are we at in our ecosystem? We MVP'd. We broke it. You know, we built some really cool things and broke those, and we're going to always break and build. But I think now we have to figure out what is product market fit and then stabilize those things. So I mentioned the SBDC, like it's illegal for them to market. That's why no one knows about them, right? It's like, it's against the law.
Why?
Because it's seen as competing against the private sector.
Oh, weird.
Yeah, because it's free, right? And so
that's so weird.
Yeah, so I think that we're in that phase now where we, like, as entrepreneurs and people who have moved up the ecosystem, it's time for us to give back financially. I think that's a big one. But also to say, listen, like that's not working, and moving and pivoting, right? And if something starts to bud up, like you mentioned that other program, well, how can we be involved? Like I'm not going to do anything with them personally.
Yeah.
But like maybe the government's office can, or Silicon Slopes can, or, you know, these bigger entities. Anyway, I don't know where we're going to go from here, but I do think that that is a core pivot that we have to accept.
Do you think it's like an attempt for, because you're obviously not doing it for money when
Right.
you're doing the type of thing that we do. Like we're a nonprofit, you're in government.
Right.
There's no money in this thing.
No.
Right.
No money. Let's repeat
In
that.
fact, most of the time you're just begging.
Yeah, you're just
for
begging.
money, and you're like, oh, this is going to be cool. And they're
Yeah.
like, why would that be cool? And it's
Right.
like, I don't know.
Yeah.
So there's no financial incentive really, except for in the investor world, there is.
Right.
To organize and to be seen as the one organizing and to be bringing everybody in and all of that type of stuff. There is that component. The challenge of that is so few people are venture investable.
Right.
You know, like less
So
than
few.
like 1%.
Right.
And so then you've got like this very exclusive community that's not entirely representative of like, I never see like these retail or consumer brands, like these incredible entrepreneurs that we
Right.
have here in the state.
Yeah.
Any of these other like venture led type events. And why would they? Like, that's not a criticism. That's like, you got to do what you do.
Right.
And so it is interesting, like so there's got to be that piece on the venture side. And then I think when on other things, it's probably just like, there probably is some influence. There probably is some recognition. There probably is some quote unquote power that comes with it. Maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
I've never experienced the power piece.
No. I think what it comes with it is just pure marketing, right?
Yeah.
And that's hopefully where we can come in, right? Like I told you, I think a lawn mowing business is just as exciting as Kidzix shoes, right? Like I got Kidzix in my car.
Yeah.
You know, like I think consumer products are even sometimes more exciting because someone can hold them. I mean, Thread Wallet is just down the street, right?
Yeah.
Like those things are really, really amazing. And we do a great job on those.
Incredible.
Like it's such
We're so good at that.
So good at it, but it's so expensive.
Yeah.
Right. So if we look at it from an entrepreneurial thing, you did all the hard work, you've been broke up and you're like making $5 million a year. And I've seen companies do this many times and then they die because they can't get funding. Right. And they're not venture backable still. And so it's kind of this weird moment. And so a lot of investors, like they kind of live and learn. Right. So as I used to screen all the deals for Park City Angels, love that group. And we saw some of those consumer products come and go. And so as an investor, you're like, maybe I'm not going to do that again.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't get my money. They're doing great, but
Yeah.
like I didn't get the story I wanted to tell, you know? So when you get like, you know, some of these other companies, Divvy and things like that, that story gets told 100 million times for free, right? It's told between friends. It's told, you know, nationally. And I think that that's a hard thing to overcome, you know? And so that's why people go down that path, right?
Yeah.
They don't realize it. They're like, I just need money. And you're like, no, what you want is them to write a story about you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Community starts with stories.
Totally.
Community is run by stories.
Yeah.
Community, you could be argued, is stories.
Yeah.
Which I've always found like really interesting around the way you can organize people and the way like things like this. Like this is like, I would have never guessed like me talking to various people in our community would like matter at all, but it's interesting to people. Right. And I actually think it's as productive as, you know, anything else that Silicon Slopes does.
Oh, totally.
You know, which is
when you
kinda
get the real thing that's happening, right? Especially when people are like, I don't know if they said things that they shouldn't have, but you're like, oh,
yeah,
okay. That's how you really feel.
Yeah.
We can do something about that.
Yeah.
Because we didn't know, you know?
Yeah, that's exactly right. What have you learned as a leader?
Oh man, trust is huge. I think trust is one of those things that people, and I'm going to say this because I think it's important. Utah leads in fraud. And I think that is detrimental. If we're going to build this ecosystem, detrimental to entrepreneurship as a whole, just anything. So if I could fix one thing, I would bring that number down. And I don't know how that works. But for me, trust is huge. So there's a book, Creativity Inc. I don't know if you've read it.
Great book.
So good. But it talks about every Monday, I think it is, everyone just throws ideas on the wall, like good, bad, doesn't matter. Like they're just an idea. There is no value placed on them. And I think when, let's say you're my boss, if you trust us then those ideas can come forward. Now I have to trust you as my leader, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I don't, then I'm never going to share what's really happening. And that thing is, I hope that, again, we bring fraud down so the trust in Utah continues to rise.
Why do you think we are the leaders of fraud? Is it kind of the same reason why we're good at startups?
So. I think so. Because one of the things that I'm trying to figure out, and I'd love help on this because I don't know.
Yeah.
There's different types of entrepreneurs, right? There's the student entrepreneur that has nothing to lose, no bills, whatever, right? Especially like the schools here are so cheap, right? Truly nothing to lose. So they can go out and do all the things they need to do, and they're really protected for 4, 6, 8 years, right? How long they're in school. So that's awesome. You have the other entrepreneur who's older, right? Statistically, the most successful entrepreneurs are over 55 because they've been in their industry for a long time. They know what's not working. They also know all the buyers, right?
Mm-hmm.
So those two can be really successful. The people in the middle are the people who got laid off, right? I call them the unemployable, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they have a skill, like veterans fit this category as well. Me being a veteran, like I see these people like, I just did this thing for 5, 10, 20 years and no one will hire me. So they just naturally go out and just have to make money.
Yeah.
I think if you look percentage wise, I think the majority percentage wise fit in that unemployable category, and you end up doing whatever it takes to make money.
Yeah.
And so since we are a great community of sales, you're going to catch up to an Eskimo if you can, right?
What are some rain clouds you see for the future of Utah? Because we always talk about all the great things, but what are some rain clouds?
I think fraud is one.
Yes.
Yeah, a big one. I think competition where competition we've talked about this, doesn't need to exist, like lean more heavily. Like the other one I think is just buying. I say buying tickets, like buy tickets. It's so cheap. You're going to do it to something else anyway, right? I think that's another one that's really going to hurt us moving forward, right? Because if again, you're the entrepreneur, if no one's buying your ticket, then your business is going to shut down.
Yeah.
And if you want these resources to stay free, then you have to pay. So sponsors right now, and you know this, both of us know this, we're all competing for sponsorship dollars.
And from the same people.
And there's just not that much money to go around. Like I said, 1% of companies, are more than 2 employees. That's wild. Not very many,
Yeah. The sponsor thing is really interesting because I think it's probably okay to have as many organizations pop up as possible and may the best one win. But you don't really know who's in long term. You don't really know the effectiveness of things for about a decade.
Yeah. Yeah. The book I'm reading says 20 years.
Yeah. I mean, we're a decade
in, literally.
Yeah. And so I'm not sure, the thing you have to ask yourself as a sponsor, some of these other folks, are they going to be here 10, 15, 20 years from now?
Right.
What am I funding here? What's my purpose? And some sponsors, again, it'll be obvious why they should do it because would personally benefit their company and all those types of things. And they should do those things.
Right.
But the sponsor thing is really interesting because we don't have this huge well to draw from in this state because there's not a lot of huge companies that you mentioned before. And it's just not practical for them to spread money to all of them.
Mm-mm.
That part is really interesting.
Yeah. Well, we don't even have that many people. I mean, 4 million-ish people?
Not even that. I think it's 3.5.
So yeah. And then less about 1.5 or so million are along the Wasatch Front. So you're talking let me spread $5,000 over 50 different organizations. So what ends up happening, and you've seen this, is people just pull back completely, especially post-COVID. Right.
Well, there's certainly, it is much harder. I can't imagine anybody who would say something different. It is much harder to raise sponsorships now than it was in 2019.
Yeah.
There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, especially we're seeing the tech sector right now really struggling.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
That's what I was going to ask you. Tech kind of has had its moment.
Yeah.
Again, probably a good decade of kind of being the shining ecosystem or the shining industry in the state of Utah.
Mm-hmm.
Not the biggest, but still the one that was getting the most press and interest from people. And it was wow, this is really crazy.
Yeah.
It does seem like that's not going to be true in the next 10 years or it could be, but there are other things that are popping up like energy and things around those things, what I think would probably be the leaders moving forward. But how are you seeing that?
Yeah. So I don't know. This is an interesting one because you're right. Like, I think we're going to see more mom and pop tech companies. I think that that's going to be a movement. I think we're going to see PE happening a lot more. My prediction is Utah's going to become more of a private equity play in the next 10 years. I hope we do that, actually. I'd love to see us be the headquarters for 5 Fortune 500 companies. I think that we don't have any, which is crazy. Like,
oh yeah, it's weird.
It's so weird. Boise's got 3, I think. So it's really interesting to see. I think that that's the next wave here in Utah specifically. I don't know. I don't know what we're going to do next. AI is huge. But again, I think AI is going to allow for mom and pop tech companies to exist. And these companies are going to do $2 to $5 million a year.
That's where AI is going to help.
Yeah.
In Utah in particular, because we're not leading in AI. And it's doubtful that we will.
Right.
I do think Silicon Valley is the epicenter of that.
Right. But we can sell it.
We can sell it.
Yeah.
And we can build these smaller companies using that technology for specific industries. I do think you're right there. There probably will be a movement here of like, don't raise venture capital ever.
Yeah.
Bootstrap as long as you can and stay small.
Stay small.
Stay small and if something pops, then think about it.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, and we've been doing that. Qualtrics is a great example.
Yeah. All of our wins, except for Divi, which is the craziest story ever.
Right.
All of our big wins are that.
We are going to see a big push, I think, more into the fintech space. With the success of Divi and those companies, the University of Utah or I don't know if they've launched it yet, but that fintech dorm.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that that's going to be really interesting to see what happens, which means that we got to get big bank here. We've got Goldman Sachs, which is great, but how do you get Bank of America and, these bigger banks to, or even Zions to step up to be bigger than they are,
Yeah.
I don't know. That's pure speculation, but I do think we need big business here. And I see that also from the education of employment as well. Like, I was in New York for a while. Like, people make a lot of money out there. Like, how do you bring someone who's making $500,000 in New York money? Like, what job do they even come to in Utah?
That's a great question.
I don't know. And they're with growth.
That is a really interesting question. I think that can be answered more now than 10 years ago.
Totally.
But it's still interesting. Like, I'm not, particularly in like New York stuff, there's no finance.
No.
At Goldman, like you mentioned, but I don't even know if that position that you just mentioned where you're making 500 would exist here in the state of Utah, even in Goldman. That is a really interesting question.
Yeah. That's the one that I think about. Like, if we're going to grow, we got to get some big business here that becomes, again, stability in the ecosystem as a whole.
Yeah. Yeah, that is a fascinating. What is our top industry right now? Is it healthcare?
It's got to be health. So the big 5 are aerospace, healthcare. So like L3, those big companies, but they just had big layoffs too recently. But yeah, I think aerospace, health tech in general, agriculture is huge. And aerospace, I think those are our big 5.
Is it like ag tech?
No, it's exporting of steak or beef. Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Which is crazy, right? So like, cool. I mean, you just drive around Utah and you'll see that, but we don't think about it as an industry when we're not like in it every day.
Yeah. What do you think from a bio and health and tech industry, particularly coming out of the University of Utah?
Yep.
You've got this incredible company in Recursion.
Yep.
That is just killing it.
Right.
And what they're doing is phenomenal. And the leadership there is awesome. Like, that might sprout something really interesting.
I think it does, but I think you need 5.
Yeah.
You need 5 recursions, right? And we have them, but there's deep tech, this is what it's called, like technology that takes a long time to develop is really, really expensive, right? So let's just say you're doing some kind of pharmaceutical.
Mm-hmm.
I could give you $5 million and that's not enough, right?
Oh, not even close.
Not even close. That's basically MVPing, right? Or benchtop testing. So you go to your 50 million, which is your next raise, and then your final raise is like 100 million. And then that's finally when you've decided that this could be a product or not, right? But what's interesting is the investors, and this is no fault to what's happened here, but we all bought into nail it, then scale it.
Yeah.
If you, over this last 10 years, and you're like, yeah, but, and you're like, just go sell 5 and see if anyone wants to buy. But that model doesn't work in deep technology at all. And so you have to have an entirely different group of an investor mindset to make that a reality.
I worry that model won't work even for tech soon. I don't know if I have Paul Hallstrom, one of the authors of that, coming in here on Friday. So I'll ask him. Yeah. But I don't know, because with AI, I'm sure you saw Sam Altman say there will be a solo founder who runs $1 billion tech company within the next 10 years.
I think it's possible.
I think that's possible in a really, really real way. And so then what does that do to the tech industry? That's really fascinating.
Take what that guy has to learn though, and know.
That's true.
He could do it, but you have to have learned sales process from SDRs to, account executives to implement. You got to know all those roles in order to AI them. Yeah, you could, probably get a software off the shelf, right? Then you got to do the same thing with HR. And then the same thing with all these. I mean, I guess it's just you, but you got to figure out all these systems and processes. And unless you've gone through them all, you don't know if the tool's going to be even good enough, right? Like I do a lot of these like business model AI tools because I think they're fascinating. And you're like, that was neat, not helpful, but neat. You know what I mean? Like did it give me like 2% further? Sure. But I think like that's where the AI, you've got to be almost the most genius person in order to understand how that's all going to work.
Yeah, whoever does that would be wild. And
it'd be so
for
cool,
sure
though.
they'd have contractors.
They're probably going to come from Utah, let's be honest.
You're doing startup competitions, right?
We are. Yep.
With the U?
Yes. So we have a program we're launching called Get Started. It'll probably officially launch in November timeframe. But basically it's not a competition. I mean, it's competition meaning like not everybody gets funded, but the idea is to help people get started. That's why we named it that. Like I want people to come out who've just got the dumbest ideas from the furthest point in Utah and say, listen, if you give me $287.12, I can accomplish this milestone. And so that's the way that it's functioned. So it's less than $500. And I know the feedback, no one can start a company under $500. I'm like, I promise you they can. Like, and I think that's one of the things that we've learned through Nail and Scale It, that if I gave you $200, the odds of you spending it is actually pretty low, because you're like, look, how can I stretch that $200 and make it worth 10 grand? And scrappy people do that. So this program is a spinoff of a program called Get Seated that's already been at the U for 10 years. So two things are happening. One is we're opening up the Get Started side for the public. And then Get Seated is opening back up to all students. So it'll be nice that we can hit both populations under the same.
So Get Started isn't just for U of U.
No,
students.
it's for all Utah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, so Get Seated is the student side of it. All universities, all community colleges, all everything. And then Get Started will be the public facing version of the same program.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
And a friend of mine, he got $300 from the Get Seated program and just exited his company a year ago.
Really?
Yeah. So it's like, you're like, wait, how is that possible? And it's like, well, he took $300. He got his first client, which is the University of Utah. And then, through credit cards and some other things, but built the next version and then went on to raise capital. But like it all started from a crazy idea he had one day just driving down the road, and he said, hey, Tim, can I apply? I was like, of course, like come see what happens. And then the crowd voted for him and he got his $300.
How do you overcome, as the director of entrepreneurship for the state of Utah, the fact that it is a state and government thing?
Yeah.
Like, how do you make the website and the branding and all of these? I'm sure you think about this all the time. Yep. All of these things where it's like, I'm not actually on a government website where there's tons of forms and applications and things like this, but this is super helpful. I can go startup.utah.gov. I can go to startup.utah.gov. I can see everywhere, all the VCs, all of the organizations that can help me, all the various companies, all the different ways that I could do it. And it doesn't feel governmental. I think that's might be your biggest challenge.
100%. The back end is crazy. Let's just say that. Coming from an entrepreneur who's built lots of technology, when you're like, hey, I need this, and it's done in like 30 minutes to like, that should take 30 minutes and it took 3 weeks. Let's just start there. But it's been great because our team actually cares. Like everybody wants this thing to be what entrepreneurs need. It's not going to be that way out the gate, right? But I think like with the feedback that people give us over the next however long, I mean, in a year, we're going to be an entirely new product, right? One thing we have coming up that I'm super stoked for, which took a lot to make happen, is we're calling it a startup dashboard. Like, where are businesses actually getting started, right? Like, and meaning not just ideas, but they actually filled out their business registration. that's going to be public for the first time.
That's cool.
So we can see it, right? Like you can be like, oh, 15 companies got created in, Juab County. Like that's awesome. Like we haven't been able to expose that side of the startup world since till now.
Yeah.
So I'm really excited for that. But yeah, the website's going to function more like a product, I hope, right? So the biggest one right now, so we have a chat bot going live, hopefully next week. So jump on it, break it, like ask it dumb questions, but so that we can make it better, obviously. But that's the first thing I think of us as our product, right? The resources will come in the future as well. Like we've got a decent amount of resources, but I think we'll do a better job there. But like, I'm hopeful that someone's like, oh, I saw the billboard, or I saw an ad on, YouTube or whatever. And then they're like, how do I do something? And then we point them to a human being, not just a website. Like I don't want to go website to website. Like I want to give you an email address or a phone number so that you always feel like, we always talk about how lonely entrepreneurship feels. But man, when you can talk to someone within a couple of days, like how amazing would that feel?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One of the more interesting things that Silicon Slopes has done recently is we're pairing people up one-to-one, just for like one-to-one Zoom calls every month.
Yeah.
And we're just pairing them. We actually use like an AI software that just pairs them based off of, things that they fill out in a form. It's probably the coolest program we've ever done.
Yeah.
Like the response to it has been wild. Yeah. It's like, oh, this is so cool.
We're like, wait, you want to just talk to somebody?
Yeah, that's literally the agenda. It's like, you're just meeting with this person for 30 minutes. Have fun.
That's awesome.
And that's kind of all we were doing. And you don't have to go anywhere or any of that type of stuff. And so I do think that is a big piece of community building. What do you hope like 5-10 years from now, this looks like?
Yeah. So one, I hope that we've kind of discovered the stability of our ecosystem. Like we're going to bet on this to carry us for the next 10 years. This book that I'm reading is talking about like 20 years. And I'm like, we need to you can't always pick, it's got to develop naturally and things like every time, we try something and we force it, it doesn't really work. But I think if we can stabilize certain groups that they're always there, I think that's going to happen over the next 5 years for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think that'll carry us for quite some time.
Yeah.
And then I think having input into that stability is going to be really crucial. Like you mentioned, one-to-one stuff.
Yeah.
But like one-to-many isn't something we're really playing with yet. Mm-hmm. Like there's lots of cool resources on YouTube and TikTok and things like that to like learn. But like, again, that one-to-one or one-to-many where you can feel like you've got a person, and maybe that comes from the government. I don't know yet. We'll figure that out. But I think that's going to happen. And I really I'm hopeful that we transition to, we've been Give First, right? And that's huge. Utah's a huge community of Give First. And I hope that never changes, but I hope that we see that switch also. So yeah, you gave me your time, which is way more valuable than my $100 or my $10 or whatever, right? And again, like I said before, I get it when people are in that kind of broken phase of their life and they're trying to figure it out. Don't pay. I don't want you to. Like, I would just want you to be there. Mm-hmm. But I also know when it's time, you stop asking for free tickets. You know what I'm saying? Just pay. Like, it's more beneficial to pay than for you to get a free ticket. Just don't show up.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's again, that's what I hope.
Yeah, that's actually way interesting. What's it like working for Governor Cox?
Honestly, that team is incredible. So I'm not a government person. Like, this is not where I came from. And so the first couple weeks I was there, like I said, I didn't even own a suit. So I just saw people on phones just talking to founders, especially on our team. We're the business services team. We have a ton of resources that people just don't know exist. But this guy was on the phone and he was just like, yep. And I mean, just gave that person an hour and a half of their time just to make sure they filled out a form properly, And it's not that I didn't think that was happening, but to like watch that happen and like not even being like, oh my God, like that person was so engaged in the success of that other individual. That was incredible. Like, I was like, okay, these people, government gets, talked certain ways about, but I was like, that was a moment that founder could never get even with a private person. They'd be like, well, that's a $6,000 bill. You know what I mean? Like, and they would have rushed them or like, hey, I got a meeting, but that like, they literally just stopped his day to make sure this person did what they needed to do was incredible.
That's cool.
And you see that and every single person on our team. It's not even like a one-off incident.
Yeah, that is very cool. What's it like when your boss is running for re-election?
Oh man, I don't know. I've only been there for 3 months, so there's lots of things I'm still learning.
The political piece must be interesting though. Having only been there for 3 months, maybe you don't have full context for this, but it is interesting that your boss could go away.
100%. Yeah. So I think about that
that's
stuff
kind
because
of
I'm
a fascinating thing.
Yeah, because you're like,
your boss isn't going to go away.
Right. He's great. But I mean, like, yeah, we think about that. Like, what if our funding gets pulled? It's like a startup company. Like, how do I get stabilized or whatever? Right. And I'm learning how to like beg for money in a different way. But I do think that there's opportunities there where like, if we do a good job, I mean, people like us, they hear about us and they're like, well, I want that program to stick around. Here's my vote. Right. And I never thought about it that way before until I took this job. So in some ways, it's like, I understand that we're all campaigning, right? Keep us around. Like if you like what we're doing, if you don't, tell me so I can fix it. But again, we're out there like just truly campaigning all the time, because we want our jobs to stick around too, as long as we're being value add.
Are you traveling the state a lot?
So yeah. So I mean, I come down here, which isn't too far, but this
coming to Provo is a hike.
It's like 45-minute drive. But yeah, I was we're going to Price next week. So it's nice that we get to. I was in Morgan last week. I went down to Bryce Canyon, which I'd actually never been to for the Outdoor Recreation Summit. So yeah, it's kind of fun to go and see different parts of Utah. And I camp, so I go everywhere anyway.
Yeah.
But like, it is cool to have it in a different capacity. Like we got to go, I went and met with the Morgan Small Business Development Center, and they took us on a tour of a company up there that's building like these big manufacturing walls, like super cool. And you're like, wait, that's here in Utah? Like those are the companies that like, I want to hear more about. Cause like we forget like, yeah, Divvy's great. Domo's great. Like Doby's great. But like, there are these companies that are doing $10s and $20 million of, revenue that no one knows about, except for the 8 people that work there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's interesting. Tim, thanks so much for coming on.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
And again, the state is so lucky to have you in this position. I'm
honored.
It's so cool. Thanks for everything you're doing. Come back anytime. And we'll see you at Summit.
All right.
And the millions of other events that are happening.
Let's do it.
Thanks, my friend.
Awesome.